Oh, it's looking good. Coffee's flowing. It's time to get going.
Hey, welcome back to Questions Over Coffee. My name's Kevin Smith. It's good to see you again. Want a cup of coffee? Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss anything that's coming up on Questions Over Coffee. If you have a comment or a question, leave in the section below. We'll get to it just as fast as we can. Today's question is one that I took off of Deseret.com about 50 questions that, believers are asked every day about Christianity, about the Bible, about God, things like that. This particular question is, what's the difference between a pastor, priest, or preacher? There are some faiths that use these terms seemingly interchangeably. But really, what is the difference? Today, what we're going to do is I'm just going to look a little bit at the Greek and see if we can come up with perhaps what the difference may be. The first thing we want to look at is the word for pastor. Running a search in the NAS Olive Tree app, I only found one reference for pastors, and it was Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11. When Paul is making this list, he gave some to be, he gave some to be, some to be, and pastors is in that particular list. This particular word is poimenos. It is from the word poimene. It is the same word that Jesus uses in John 10 when he says, I am the good shepherd. This is translated as shepherd, guardian, or leader in most cases, and also here in Ephesians 4:11, it is translated as pastors. So in this case, most of the time, the way I've heard it at least, is preachers will be called pastors in some groups. Sometimes your eldership will be called a pastor in certain groups as well. The more common Greek words that are used to describe the leadership of the church is, first of all, presbyteros. We see this word used in 1 Timothy chapter 5 when Paul is giving a list of qualifications for the eldership. This is sometimes simply used for someone who is advanced in age, although in 1 Timothy 5 that is not what Paul is referring to necessarily, someone who is just an older fella. It's used to talk about elders, and that list again of qualifications for someone who can fill this particular office is in 1 Timothy 5 and also Titus chapter 1. Another word that could be used as a translation here is a presbyter, and some religious organizations do use presbyters to describe their leadership as well. The other word that is often used is episkopos. This one is one that's responsible for the safeguarding of texts, overseeing something that is done to make sure it's done in a correct way, a correct manner. A guardian, an overseer, a supervisor. These have a special interest in guarding the apostolic traditions. Passages that you might consider for those are 1 Timothy chapter 3 and also Titus chapter 1 verse 7. You'll find those words used there. As far as a preacher goes, sometimes a preacher is an elder, sometimes not. In my case, no, I am not. I am a preacher, a proclaimer, a fancier word, I guess you could say, is a herald. This particular word is kerux, and you see that in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 7, also 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 11, and Romans chapter 10, verse 14, and all of those times the translators have used the word for preacher in the NAS. The final word that we want to look at is the word priest, and I'm going to give you three different Greek terms because they all relate to one another in this particular case. The first one is for the priestly office. You see this in the book of Hebrews quite a bit. One of the passages you can look at is Hebrews chapter 7, verse 14, but it's all over the book of Hebrews. It is hierosune, and it is simply priestly office. If you're talking about a priest, it's again a related word, hierus. It is translated just straight up priest, someone who fills that particular role. It is Hebrews 7:21 and also 7:23. You see that also in Revelation 1 verse 6 as well, and some other passages in the New Testament as well. I am not giving you an exhaustive list here, but the Revelation passage, he refers to believers as a kingdom of priests. The final word that we want to look at is hieratuma, and it is priesthood. In other words, I guess it's a collection of priests. This is the word that Peter uses in 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 9 when he calls us a royal priesthood. So what's the big difference? Well, as far as I can tell anyway, and as far as the churches of Christ can distinguish, priesthood and also priests now refer to Christians, whereas before it was a certain group of people, Levites, that were the priests that stood before God for the people. But now, based on Revelation 1:6, based on 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, this no longer refers to a certain group of people that fill a certain position. This refers to Christians that have been washed in the blood of Jesus through baptism. It is no longer a certain person that a person has to go to pray to God, or to, well, serve God. They can do that on their own, thankfully. As far as the other two particular titles, preacher, in one sense, every person should be a proclaimer of the message, in their lives, being willing to sit down with someone and teach them the scriptures. However, this particular word that was used here refers to a specific position, a specific role that is being filled. It may or may not be one that could be anyone and everyone. As far as pastor, it seems to only refer to the eldership, because they are the shepherds of the flock, the shepherds that are responsible for the Christians' souls, making sure also what is taught is correct, and things of that nature. Again, sometimes the preacher also fills a role of elder. However, sometimes he does not. Although in many cases he is the one, right or wrong, that is responsible for the counseling of folks that need counseling within the congregation. So in some senses he does fill that role as well, or at least some of the duties of that particular role, at least in some congregations. So hopefully this helps to clear up some of the confusion that surrounds these three particular words of pastor, priest, and preacher. I have a question for you. How does your religious organization use these three words? Or does it even use these three words? Leave me a comment in the section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss anything that's coming up on Questions Over Coffee. Thank you for our time together today. I look forward to the next time. Keep pressing forward.